Hi everyone, you're very welcome back. This is Maria Means with Gript Media. Today I am joined by Marino Restrepo. Marino is an internationally acclaimed speaker, author and full-time missionary for the Catholic Church. Marino was working in Hollywood in the entertainment industry in 1997 when, during a visit to his native Colombia, he was kidnapped by guerrilla rebels and was held captive for a period of 6 months. During his captivity, he experienced a radical conversion back to his Catholic faith through an incredible mystical experience he encountered. 2 years after that, Marino formed the lay apostolate Pilgrims of Love, and he travels worldwide. He's been in over 120 countries, and he's written 3 books, including From Darkness into the Light, which shares about his incredible testimony. He's just finished a mission in Northern Ireland, and he joins us now. Marino, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And how did your mission go? I know you were in England and you were in Scotland as well, and then you finished off in the north and you had big crowds.
Yes, it was great. It was good to be back. I haven't been back for 10 years, so it was very good to see my old friends and to see all the people so eager and so thirsty for God. And that was really good, and I felt really good. It was a good mission, very good.
And you still notice that here, because I know in Ireland we've had quite challenging times in terms of the faith and in terms of Catholicism. And did you notice a difference coming back, over that 10-year period? You still could see that hunger in people?
Yes, I still do. And also the pandemic times also created an effect on people. And I guess people that were already very strong in the faith got even better, more thirsty, and the zeal for God is grown a lot, yes.
And Marino, I know I gave a very brief introduction into who you are. Would you, for our listeners with Gript, who I'm sure some of them have heard of you before, for those who do not know who you are, would you introduce a bit about your mission? You have your lay apostolate, Pilgrims of Love, and what you do.
Yes, like you said in the beginning, I was an entertainer in California. I went to school in Germany in the 70s, but I worked in Hollywood for over 25 years. But in year 97, there was a big change in my life because I went to visit with my family in Colombia during Christmas of that year. And I was kidnapped by the rebels, the FARC rebels, and kept in the jungle for 6 months for a ransom. And those were really trial times and difficult. And I was sentenced to death. It's a miracle I'm here. And they took lots of money and also tortured my family and me for all that time. But something really great happened during these stormy times, and it was the experience I had with God. So I had a very transcendental experience with God, which we can call a mystical experience, like an ecstasy, while I was captive in a cave. And I was in a terrible state because I just had been sentenced to death and had been living in a torturous life for 15 days. So this experience showed me a truth that I had walked away from since I was very young. Like when I was 14 years old, though I grew up in a Catholic family, I walked away from the Catholic faith, and for 33 years I was just very worldly, materialistic, and nothing of the spirit. So during that experience, I went back to this reality of the spirit and changed my life. I made it out of the jungles by a miracle, I could say. And then instead of going back into the business I founded a mission called Pilgrims of Love, as you already said. And this mission has taken me around the world for 23 years already. We are a lay Catholic community. We evangelize practically the baptized, and also we are open to all kinds of people and creeds and things because the the real message is to understand that there is a God and that goodness is the right way to live, and to be aware of evil and to understand sin. And all of this is what we really try to get to the center of attention of people. And this is the main mission, to bring God to people. Regardless of religion, in many cases, it's just God to people. And then people will be sometimes interested in knowing more, and we will lead them, into that. Yes.
Marino, would you detail your background growing up? I know you grew up in a coffee plantation town in Colombia, and your life, your childhood, you grew up, as you said, in a Catholic family, but you, at some point when you were very young, departed from the faith, and you were living a very different life up to that point when you were kidnapped in 1997.
Yes, my life growing up in my town was beautiful. It was a country life. All my family are coffee growers. So I grew up in the midst of big farms and in the mountains. Very good times, beautiful. And church life, a large family. I am the number 6 of 10 children, and all my uncles and aunts, they had 15 children and more. So it was a great community life. Then I walked into this revolution of the 60s, the hippies, and that's how I left the Catholic Church, because I became syncretized. I went into Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the isms, and also got into these astrologies and numerology. That was part of the culture, and I completely walked away from Christianity, and led me into a very materialistic life, where money, pleasure, fame, living in the fast lane, as they call it. That's what it was, I achieved many dreams I had never even had, and people, when you are born in a little town, they say that you have big dreams. But I was able to do a lot of things with my profession as an actor and musician. And that gave me the opportunity to really know the world and to enjoy the world, to enjoy materialism and consumism. And I was totally relativist, in everything. So this was who I was up until the kidnapping. And I enjoyed a lot my profession and the life I lived. But then when I had this encounter with God, I went into another level and realized morals, values, principles, the integrity of a life lived with God. So I found a much gracious and challenging life in my new life. But I think that my past life was important, because what I do today, I can pick from my past life and use it really greatly for what I do.
And would you detail the exact events of that night? It was Christmas Eve, 1997, and I think you were going to stay at your brother's ranch, and you were driving in. That was when you were kidnapped.
Yes, it was Christmas Eve, and when I was kidnapped by the rebels and taken prisoner to the jungle. Altogether, I was kidnapped for 6 months, but the first 15 days I was kept in a cave, tied up with a hood over my head. And the day 15, I was 47 years old that night, but I entered into an ecstasy. I didn't know what an ecstasy was. I thought I was dying. And I appeared at age 3 in the inside patio of the house where I was born in my hometown. And I was on a tricycle with a stick in my hand, going through the gardens of the house, hitting the plants and the flowers. And I was in total panic because I didn't understand what was going on, and I couldn't get off the ecstasy. So I continue on reliving my life. And I think I relived my whole life. So after this, something even more mysterious happened during the ecstasies, where I heard the voice of God for a long time. Then I was placed in a lake, and I had experience of my sins of 33 years. I had experience of hell, purgatory, heaven, and all of these I have written in a book, because it's very extensive, and I had experience with my guardian angel, and had experience with the Virgin Mary, and the church itself with the sacraments, and the power of the Spirit in our lives, and the mission of the church in the world, and the salvation of souls. All of this transcendental vision of life I didn't have, which was to know that life goes on after death, and that the spiritual realm is what really rules this earthly life. So my eyes were open, my eyes of the Spirit, and my life changed completely.
You were able to see very much the way in which your soul was before God if you had died.
The first part of the ecstasy is an illumination of conscience, because my conscience had been sleeping all those years. I lived in mortal sin. So now the conscience woke up, and it was very painful, because I could perfectly see the sense of sin, the consequences of sin, how much I had hurt people and offended God and placed my soul in so much danger. And then the church, when God spoke to me, He spoke about the church, how I had been chosen from the womb of my mother to be a Catholic, and how I had deserted it. And then He spoke about the church and the sacraments and the Holy Spirit and the mission of Catholics on this earth, and the humanity as a family, because He spoke about salvation for everyone, and the Catholic Church as an army in charge of protecting souls, and its mission for salvation of souls. And so it was very powerful, and it opened my eyes in a very important way.
And one of the things, I know I read your book, and the interesting thing is that you say is prior to your conversion experience, you were very much interested in New Age and Eastern philosophies. And as someone who had been baptized a Catholic, when you were in that situation of being in the cave, obviously you'd been told by these rebels that you were not going to live, that they were going to take your life once they had been given the money, the ransom. And you were very much in a position where you were sort of calling out for help, in terms of you didn't even, this sort of philosophies that you had learned and the energies and all of these things, that in that moment they really meant nothing to you.
Absolutely. This was one of the first shocking experiences that night, because when they sentenced me to death and put me back in the cave, I was in so much distress and aiming for power, for something to lift me up, to give me the strength and to save me. And all I had was all the magic, the numerologies, the astrologies, the metaphysics of esotericism, and also all these Hindu, Buddhist, Shintoist practices, mental control techniques, everything I had that is known as New Age. None of that came to my aid. None. Nothing. Nothing worked. Things that I thought were so powerful, and none of them had the slightest hint of power for me. That was devastating, because I was left empty-handed. I was left on my own misery there, and that's when I entered the ecstasies.
You know, you hear you talking, and even the witness you give, you're very grateful to be alive, and there is a sense that really it's miraculous that you are here.
Absolutely. I know for a fact that it was a miracle that those guys set me free on that road, and I know they never knew why they didn't kill me. I know they didn't understand it, because I could feel it was totally supernatural what took place that night. And I was left there on the road in the dark, and I didn't even know I was free. I was just walking not knowing what was going to happen.
And in your book and in your testimonies, when you speak, you talk about how coming through that experience, the mystical experience you had, one of the big things for you was you'd been away from the sacraments for 33 years, and really your desperation, and like I can only imagine the desperation after seeing what you saw and experiencing the state of sin that your soul was in, you were desperate to go to confessions, and that was one of the first things, maybe the first thing you did once you were freed from captivity.
Yes, to me, during the time of captivity, after I had the experience with God, I knew that I needed confession to be free from all the spiritual darkness I had because of my sinful life in the past. And I knew only the church, through the sacrament of confession, had that power, that authority. So that was my biggest plea to God. And I actually got there to confession after this miraculous rescue from God, and made it to a Franciscan monastery. And it was a very long confession. And when I received the absolution from the priest, it was like the most undescribable freedom I could ever experience in my life, because I knew all these demons that I saw that were related to my sins were gone once the priest gave me the absolution. And I could feel the power of that sacrament. And I continually tell people around the world in the church to be aware of the gift of confession and how important it is to be clean, you know, to not to have any spiritual influences of the dark in our lives, because they really hurt us. They really lead us wrong and bring the wrong things to our lives, wrong people, wrong circumstances, bad things, when we are contaminated with these spirits, you know. So confession keeps us clean.
And Marino, how were you able to, would you detail your escape from the jungle, how you were able to get out of the jungle and make it back, and how you were rescued?
I was left on the road. It was very dark, late at night, and I walked and walked on the road, not knowing I was free. But the rebels had gone back into the woods, and it was a dirt road. So I continued walking for a long time, and an old bus showed up and stopped a few meters ahead of me. And a woman came out of the bus and went into the woods. I recognized her as a guerrilla woman. And so I ran towards the bus and yelled at the driver that I was a kidnapped man that was just set free, to please take me. And the driver was just laughing at me because I looked terrible. You know, like I had my beard down to my chest, all dirty, and my clothes was all ripped, and I looked like a skeleton. I had lost all my weight, and so they thought I'm just a crazy person in the jungle. But so they didn't want me in the bus. But you know, it was a dirt road, an old bus. They started going very slowly, and I pushed myself in the bus. And they took me out of the jungle. That's how I made it out.
And psychologically, like from a purely human perspective, it's a huge trauma to go through. How did you psychologically cope, you know, with the aftermath?
It was a journey that I lived practically with faith, like by going back into the church, beginning to learn how to be a Catholic. So my sacramental life, going to Mass every day, going often to confession, as I kind of rebooted my life, and also prayer and lots of meditations began to help me. But it took about 2 years for me to begin feeling a healing, because I was hurt deeply. I had problems forgiving the rebels, and I had many fears and anxieties, and I knew that there was a way to deal with this with science, you know, through psychology and psychiatry and medication and therapies, but I didn't go to any of that. I just let it all to God, and through prayer and sacraments, I made it out. It was probably longer than it probably would have taken through science. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say. But I went with faith.
Yeah, you were able to heal yourself through prayer.
Through prayer, yes.
And one of the things I want to mention is prior to your experience that you had, you were praying that your life would be changed, but you were praying in a very different way that your life would be changed you did a novena to the Child of Prague, because I think your sisters were doing the novena and you decided to do the novena, and you were asking for very different things, but you wanted a change in your life. And it was when the novena concluded that all hell broke loose, really, yeah.
It's true. I tell people I recommend this novena, but make sure you put your safety belt on. You don't know how Jesus is going to answer. Well, yes, during that novena, I haven't been in a Catholic church for 33 years, so I just went there to please my sisters. Yeah. But I said to myself, maybe I can get something out of this. And I asked the baby Jesus to change my life. The change of life I wanted was something totally materialistic, nothing to do with anything spiritual. But the baby Jesus actually changed my life that Christmas, because it was exactly the day after I finished the novena that I was kidnapped, and this big change of my life began.
And you formed your lay apostolate, Pilgrims of Love. So you went back to work, did you, after your experience, and then you didn't really know that you had a mission. Your plan was just to go back and to be a sort of a simple, Catholic in your parish and go about your life. And that must have been, quite a hard thing to accept, such a change in life.
It was, because my life in the entertainment business was not only a busy life, but it was an excited life. And I was so attached to that. I liked it a lot. So when I came back after my experience in the jungle, I went back to work. I had many legal problems because of the robbery of the rebels. They left me with lots of problems. I spent like 2 years going to trials with the credit cards, with so many things that were all financial. And so I had to work. It was difficult because I couldn't take jobs that will go against my faith now, which I will easily take before. Now I didn't. So it wasn't easy to come back to work. And little by little I felt that I didn't belong to the world anymore. But I knew I had to be there. And I didn't know I had a mission. So I became a Catholic again, and I knew I had to be this very humble little Catholic, obedient to the church, and that's it. That's all I knew. And I thought that was going to be the rest of my life like that.
And when you speak, Marino, it is fascinating. I've heard you speak before. People are always very captured because you have no notes. You have no notes in front of you. You don't prepare. You let the Holy Spirit guide you, which is really fascinating to watch. But the Lord told you that you would have infused knowledge, I think, and that you would be able to share your story, and that those who would listen to you, He already knew them by name.
Absolutely. Past 2 years after I was released, I went back to Colombia during a Holy Week. And on Palm Sunday at noon Mass in Bogota in a big church, I had another experience with Jesus from a crucifix that was hanging from the top of the altar, another ecstasy. And during that ecstasy, Jesus showed me that I had been born for this mission, and the mission was just going to start. I was already 49 years old, and I was really broken still from the kidnapping, hurt. And so I didn't feel like I had the vitality and the enthusiasm, I didn't know, I knew I wasn't in shape, mentally, emotionally, but He showed me that's what I was going to do. And since He had already performed such a miracle, rescuing me from the jungle, I knew He was going to take a miracle, and I knew it was possible for Him, but I knew it had to be a miracle. And He did, because I went back to my confessor, my first confessor, when I came out of the jungle and went to this Franciscan place. I found this confessor, and for the first time, I shared my mystical experience with him. And he led me into this new life, into the mission that Jesus showed me. And that's how I walked away from my artistic career and founded this lay apostolate.
And did you struggle with sharing the experience that you've been through? You've been, to 120 countries to share your story, and I'm sure you've faced people who maybe, would have a lot of questions, or maybe who don't fully grasp what you're talking about or even believe in your testimony. Do you struggle with pushback?
Not really. I think that when God gives you a mission, He also gives you the grace, And though you find people that are skeptical, which is to be expected, and you find people that are questioned, by what you do, what you say. So many questions are difficult, but still I flow with them, and let people be free. I'm not afraid of any question, and no question offend me, because people have the right to doubt. I am surprised when they believe me, So I'm free with that, and not it doesn't affect me. And the first 2 years of my mission were healing, because the more I spoke about what happened to me, the freer I gotten from the memories and from the hurt. And so very soon, like 2 or 3 years in my apostolate, I was very free from the past, from what took place in the jungle.
And your main message is, when you speak to Catholics, to wake up. That's really, and you even say in your talks, you find a lot of Catholics who you feel are sleeping. What do you mean by that?
I mean that our church is such an amazing gift. We are an army, a people set apart, chosen. St. Paul even calls us predestined. So we are in charge of salvation of souls. That's our mission. If you read the gospel, Jesus tells Peter and his brother, and then James and John, tell them, I'm going to make you fishermen of men. Come along with me. And this is our mission. So when Catholics are not really aware and centered in this mission, they become worldly. See, they use religion, if they do, as something else they do, among all the things they do. The Catholic Church is not the center of their lives, and therefore they are not within the Spirit of God as one. They don't have a oneness with God, and that is being asleep. So I say, waking up and becoming one with the Church, one with God, will make you whole, and you will have a much more powerful life. You will experience a shifting like I did, and a most gracious life, a life of incredible inner rewards, a peace that the world cannot give you, a joy that money cannot give you. And I had experienced all of this because I had the money, I had the success in the world, and the opportunity to do what I wanted and go where I wanted. But that wasn't enough. That never gave me what I have today.
One of the other fascinating things you mentioned earlier on was that you were told that you were predestined and you were chosen to be a Catholic, and it's the same for anyone who even comes into the church if they're 80 years of age and they convert into the church. And I think that is quite a, I suppose, a jarring thing to hear for some Catholics, because especially in Ireland, even with the scandals in the church, a lot of people have fallen away from the church.
Absolutely. I feel bad for people that walk away from the church because of what somebody else did. And obviously the scandals in the church are sad. But we are in the church not because of people. We are in the church because of God. So if we love God, why will we run away from the church because a sinner fell, So I guess we have to reboot all these ideas we have about the church and go back to God, and stay in the church because of God, not because of people. people will always disappoint us, you know. We disappoint each other left and right every day. So we cannot focus on people and depend on them to have faith. So it's sad that people walk away from the church when in fact our church is so beautiful, so powerful, so gifted, and so important.
In terms of challenges the church is facing, we had a recent census in Ireland, and it showed that while we still had a lot of people identifying as Catholics, you know, so many fewer Catholics were actually attending Mass, were actually practicing their faith. So there are definitely challenges for the church in Ireland. And I think one of the interesting things that you speak about is the need for good witnesses in the faith, for people to witness, to have love within their hearts, to be doing things for the right reasons. Would you talk about the power of witness and what you feel is demanded of to witness to others when we see so many leaving the church?
Yes, I think the main testimony that we can give as Catholics is to be good, to show people that you can be good. See, to be good, you need to be brave, because you need to be brave to forgive, to have patience, to have compassion, to have charity. You need to be courageous, you need to be brave. And it's good to show people that it's possible to be good, that it's possible to have a good heart, that it's possible to have a true, sincere spirit of service where you give yourself unconditionally, not because you want anything or expect anything from anyone, you just give yourself. And this type of testimony, which is true Christianity, changes hearts and moves people's lives and inspire people to be to be Christ-like. And this is our mission, and we should have this testimony. And this testimony is lacking a lot in the church today. People are very superficial, and that's why they fall away from the church with little things or sometimes big things, but they fall away because they are not attached to God, they are attached to people.
Another problem you speak about as well is the spirit of religiosity. And we have a lot of people who within the church are maybe they're very, you know, structured in their theology and they're very well put together and they're very well educated, but they are more, you would describe them as more religious and sort of purely religious as opposed to crossing into being spiritual. And what do you mean by that? What do you mean by, you know, being a spiritual person?
Yes, this is a very important topic because we see commonly people that are very religious, prayerful, and they go by the precepts of the law. They are good Catholics, but no love, no compassion. The virtues are very weak. So you notice their religion is not making them holy. It's not changing their hearts. So they don't have a spirituality. Obviously, we have to know that there are two spiritualities, the one of the dark and the one of the light. So I'm referring to the one of God. Because of New Age, people have a mix, a syncretism, where they bring in all spiritualities into one, but that's not possible. I'm talking about our Christian spirituality. So when people are spiritual, their religion is the foundation, but it's not the whole ground. And then you have love. If you read the gospel, you see how Jesus was treating the Pharisees very harshly. And it was because they were only religious and they had no love, no compassion. And Jesus was hitting at them to wake them up, right? And also we see other aspect of this with Nicodemus. Nicodemus was a good man to the point that he knew Jesus was the Messiah, but he didn't have the strength to say it publicly. He would see Jesus at night in the hiding. But there's something important to see there. When Jesus tells him that he has to be born of the Spirit, he didn't get it. He said, how can an old man go back to his mother's womb and be born again? So the spiritual language of Jesus was not accessible to him. And he was a doctor of the Sanhedrin. He was a doctor of the law, an authority, intellectual and theological authority of the Jews. So a very intelligent man, well-structured, educated, but no spirit, no spirituality. So he didn't get the message of Jesus because he couldn't read through the words.
And in terms of one of the things in the church, I think you gave a talk this weekend on your mission about the devil. And this is something which I think is a little bit taboo, I think, in the church in Ireland. And I suppose with the scandals and different things in the weakening of the church, priests almost don't feel like they have the authority to talk about evil, to talk about sin, to talk about the devil. And in society, we have a sort of caricature of the devil as, you know, smelling like sulphur and, you know, sort of like a cartoon and the horns in his head. But I think you're very interested on this topic in terms of, you know, this is real. We do have to address evil. And maybe that is why our church is sort of weakened in Ireland, because we're not preaching the full truth and we're not really attracting, you know, young people, for example, because they're not hearing the truth. It's not resonating with them.
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons why the youth is not interested in the church is because they don't hear the truth. And so why go to the church when the church is like the world? There's no difference between the two. There's no challenge there. And speaking about Satan is so important because Satan is real. I know that. I have experienced that in my life. And I want to tell people to really be aware that we have a spiritual enemy. And it's not like we have to be fearful about, but we have to be vigilant. We have to know that sin will make us live in the satanic realm. You know, if you are in a sinful life, you are in the territory of the dark. You are manipulated by spirits of the dark. So it's so important to have conscience of that and to make sure you walk in the light. You know, you walk in grace with God, free from the devil. So it's very important to speak about him. It's very important to speak about him as a real person, not as an idea, as an energy, or I don't know in how many ways some theologians place it and present it so weakly, you know.
Another thing I think is interesting, which you speak about in your missions, is sort of Catholics aligning themselves very much with either the left or the right. And you're always calling people to be Christ-centered as opposed to being very involved in, I suppose, news and current affairs in the world. I think a lot of people notice a spirit of division at the moment in the church.
Absolutely. You hear about the people on the right, and then you hear about people with the tridental masses and the Eucharist in tongue and kneeling, and many of them anti-pop and anti-vaccine and this and the other, and they have all these arguments and these conspiracies, and they feel better and holier than everybody else. And then you have the ones on the left that are totally liberal, progressive, and everything goes for them. Everything is valid. God loves us. Hallelujah. That's who they are. And I think that both of them are derailed. We are not to be of the right or the left. We're supposed to be Christ-centered. We have to be this humble, simple, obedient, sacramental and prayerful Catholics with a good heart and a good spirit of service. And this is the Catholicism that we should follow, in the center of the cross, in the center of Christ. The other two sides are diverted and they are dangerous. They divide the church. They are no good. It's not good to be on the right or the left.
The other thing that we see a lot, I think, within Catholic social media, and obviously we have so much social media, we're on our phones so much, but a lot of the time within the Catholic world, you know, if you look at, there is a lot of, I think, doom and gloom, and a lot of it in the world, but a lot of it is sort of propagated, sometimes you see, by Catholics, and there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of people worrying about what this person is doing, what that movement is doing, and you really call people to come out of that and to leave that sort of that doom and gloom, and to realise really your message is, well, the world is the world, and that is how it's always been. It's always been a difficult place.
It's true. I feel sad for so many Catholics that are so intelligent, many of them, and so good, and they are fooled by all these conspiracies. A lot of these conspiracies come from America. 'Cause America is like a factory of false prophets, you know, and not only America, but it's very common in America, massive. And they tell you to collect food and go into refuge, and the end is coming, and all the chastisement news, and the mark of the beast, and the Masons, and one world order, and what have you. All of this. And I tell you, all of that could be true, but it's not necessary. Because I told some people in Ontario, Canada, many years ago that were following a false prophet from New York, and they all left their cities and went into the country, bought big farms, and opened big barns where they collected food, by tons of food. And they began to die, all of them. And the children went back to the cities. You know, they couldn't wait to get away from the farms and went back to the cities. And everything they did, with time, it will all pass and didn't make any sense, you know. And also, why we shouldn't be worried about the end of the world. We shouldn't be worried about what the Masons are planning. We shouldn't be worried about one world order. Let them do it, you know. We don't belong to this world. So people ask me, what do you think about the Masons? And I say, I can care less. I don't care what they do. See, I'm not interested in even finding out what they are up to. See, but some Catholics got contaminated by Protestants, by American evangelicals and Pentecostals, and some of the cults like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. They have used terrorist religious news to cast their people. And then many Catholics found that a good source for popularity, for good ratings in internet, for money, for all of that. And today we have a lot of teachers and preachers of doom and gloom in the Catholic Church, unfortunately. They are, I call them religious terrorists.
And it's interesting because we have access to so much knowledge now, and you know, you get so many WhatsApps, people sending you different stories and different things that are happening. And obviously it's different if you're working, you know, within the media, but if, you know, I've heard you say this before, that we're not called to be journalists of the bad news, and so many people have become like that.
Absolutely. You tap into so many YouTubers, priests and lay teachers and preachers, even nuns, and they are just bad news journalists. You know, they are talking about what the devil is doing all the time, what the devil is planning, what these, all negative, all dark, and all ugly and terrible. And the gospel is nowhere, you know.
Yeah, and it can actually, I think you can see this sometimes in people that you might know or you know of, where it actually can inflict a lot of damage on them mentally, on their mental health, in terms of when they're consuming all of that. Someone is probably making money from that, but it's dangerous in terms of, especially if you're a Christian, if you're a Catholic, to sort of be so weighed down with that information. And really, is there a need, you know, to know so many things? Is it going to help you?
It's true. It makes people sick. It brings a lot of damage to mental health and takes your freedom away, your joy, you know, the capacity to belong to communities, to be in the parties freely and not to feel different than the others, you know, because that's what it does. It just intimidates you and separates you from those that don't think like you.
And you call people to be, you know, to be full of light, to be full of hope. What do you specifically mean by that in terms of being a good witness? And obviously in your own experience of your elimination of conscience, it was very much when you die, you know, it depends where you go, it depends how much light you have within you and what is there. And that's a very challenging message.
It's true. Because, you know, the Word of God says, wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So we have to always think, which is my treasure? And that's where I will end up. So we have to know that the only light that transcends from this life into the next is the love of God that we really acquire during this life. And it is the love we give. See, our works, our good works, that is the conversion of the heart. It's the love that leads you to be open to feel for everyone.
And you've written 3 books, Marino. Probably your best known book is From Darkness into the Light. There's also Catholics Awake. You've written a book about purgatory. You're currently, I think, you're still writing a book about Knock. And you're a big fan of Knock, the mystic of Knock. And it holds a special place in your heart.
Absolutely. I came to Knock in 2003, and I had an extraordinary experience with the souls, and also with the soul of my brother, younger brother, that died in an accident in the sea and in mortal sin, and I was very concerned. And Saint Teresa, little flower that is outside the shrine there, a statue of her. I was standing praying there, and I had experience with the souls, and since then I began to be very close to that apparition, and I kept on going there year after year after year, and then I decided to begin writing a book, a mystical book, based on my mystical experiences in Knock, and what the Lord has shown me, what I have felt, and what I visioned about the future of Knock.
And yeah, you're still writing that book. And
yes,
yeah.
It's called The Silence of Knock, and I practically show that there is everything but silence in Knock. It's a very loud apparition.
And it's very much as well, you say that Knock will come into its own for Catholics when we're facing quite challenging times, and we see that in Ireland at the minute, where Knock, obviously there's no words in that apparition, it's a very sometimes forgotten about in a way, but that it will take on its own importance.
Absolutely, I know that Knock is a treasure that is saved for very tough times, when people will be looking to bring true living water from deep wells. And Knock is one of those wells where God prepared for humanity this living water that people that are truly thirsty and in great need of God will find in Knock.
What would be, your advice for someone who, they might be listening to you and they might find this very hard to grasp, and they maybe do not have that level of faith, and they would like to have that sort of faith and, to believe? What would be your advice to someone who finds it challenging, or who's having a crisis in faith?
I think that you have to be simple, because with God there is no formula. We don't need to have a particular prayer, a particular devotion, a particular practice to be close to God, to enter into His chamber of love. All we need is a yes to God and say, Lord, I want you, I need you. I need to be in you and be filled with you. And simple words, simple decisions, radical decisions towards God will change your life.
Thank you so much, Marino, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.